Coogs house. The Houston Cougars knocked off Arizona over the weekend 31-28. An exciting game full of lots of star performances, but it feels like not everyone is going to be celebrating with Houston.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Please make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation, you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below who your biggest hater is. Got more on that in the second segment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and more on that throughout the show and week. Obviously, Houston opens up the week as an 8.5-point dog to Arizona State, but we'll get into all those kinds of things throughout the show. First segment of the show today, I want to talk some about looking back at the weekend that just was, some second watch all-stars from that Houston Cougar victory. I want to talk about some ratings and rankings and bummers that come with that, obviously, in the second segment. And the third and final segment, we will say rest in peace to Warren McVea. Now, admittedly, I do want to say rest in peace to Warren McVea and best regards to the McVea family at the start here. But honestly, I could wax poetically about his impact on college sports for a long time. And so I want to make sure that we do that at the end so we don't run out of time to talk about everything else. Pretty impactful Houston Cougar, to say the very least. Now, I did say let's start with some second watch all-stars and looking back at the weekend. And I got a couple on defense and a handful on offense. All just jumped off the page as honestly, like watching it through a second time, knowing the outcome, you're like, okay, that was a big play. That happened because of this guy. And I'm experimenting with what to do on these second watch kind of talks with you and whatever. Because I know you watch the game a lot too. But like when I watched the second time, Jordan Allen on the defense jumped off the page in a lot of ways. Had 7 tackles in a game when we talked about how Houston struggled to tackle. A couple of them were in key spots. He had just 1 pass allowed with him in the vicinity. I had him marked down with 2 pass breakups. PFF didn't have him with any. I think that's a discrepancy. Sometimes PFF is wrong. But ultimately, I did have him down with a pass breakup or 2. Depending on how you count a pass break, 1 might have been a bad pass. But really thought he had a strong game in the secondary. I guess actually only one of those counted because they was a penalty. Maybe that's why I didn't go in PFF stats books. But I look at a game where no Fafita for Arizona was able to do whatever he wanted through the air. Jordan Allen being able to kind of limit that was a big deal. Similarly, we talked a lot about Wrook Brown and his impact on the defense. That was obvious. He's everyone's MVP. Tremendous career type of game from Wrook Brown. Kind of been building to that over the course of the season. But Brandon Mack had a great game on the defensive front, pass rushing, putting pressure on, getting Fafita off of his spots. And Fafita for Arizona did some really cool things and really, really talented football player, obviously. But that was all done on the move, running away from pressure, flying around, getting away from guys. And that's all because the pressure Brandon Mack was applying. He didn't have the statistical output, I think, that we think of with a pass rusher of that magnitude, but he really did have that kind of a footprint or impact on the football game. In a similar vein, another guy I think had a great second watch, an all-star kind of second watch, is a guy that plays a position that doesn't get a whole lot of love, if we're being honest, in a football game. That is the left guard spot, Jason Queso Brooks. Really, really strong inside. Probably Houston's most consistent offensive lineman this year on the healthy side of things, right? I say on the healthy side of things, we'll probably briefly mention some injury stuff later, but 3rd and 1 at the end of the half, right before Tanner Koziel catches the touchdown. It's 3rd and 1. Dean Connors does a 5-yard run. We all praise Dean Connors running back at a tremendous day, 100 yards on the ground, right? But Jason Queso Brooks pulls around, and Queso fills up on a linebacker on a skip pull that launches Dean Connors for 5 yards downfield. So he gets touched again, right? And that kind of a play from left guard is big. But then you also go to a 4th and 1 situation in the third quarter on that big drive where they get this long drive for a touchdown, kind of seals the game in a lot of ways in the third quarter for Houston, which is weird to say, but I feel like Arizona was trying to scramble after that, right? There's a 4th and 1 on that drive, and there's a QB sneak that goes for almost 4 yards. And the QB sneak is just Connor taking and just following Jason Queso Brooks forward in a really, really impactful moment. So much push. You can talk about Mackenzie Agnell on the right side. He had some great moments too, but really, really impressed with what Queso was able to do in some of those key spots. Now, Agnello, I mentioned on the right side, hadn't gotten to play a lot, got to play a lot in this game. At the right guard, I thought he was really impactful on double teams as well. And, well, Jason Brooks probably stole the show. Queso's great. Agnello deserves some cred. But a guy that doesn't play a lot, 2 guys don't play a lot, that I think had really good games in their roles. DJ Butler. DJ Butler's technically the 4th running back. And if you actually include Ray, yeah, if you actually include Rashawn Sanford, who got injured in the preseason, he's more like the 5th running back. But DJ Butler came in, Stacey Sneed's out. And he got thrown in a lot. Houston kind of spent the first half trying to do some 2-back stuff, kind of get Arizona out of their element with the odd front that Arizona ran. And he was involved in the run game blocking and threw some good blocks and stuff like that. Didn't get a whole lot of carries in it, but he was an impactful part of that. And look, full disclosure, I didn't think DJ Butler was going to be able to do that kind of stuff. And he was pretty strong in that role. I also think it's worth pointing out that he is a similar body type to Stacey. It's nice to get that kind of a thing going with him as well. Another guy that you guys know I love that I thought had a pretty impactful game in his role is Mekhi Muse. I tweeted out when I saw it on Saturday, but it wasn't live, so it still counts as my second watch. Mekhi Muse lays a block on the opening touchdown Houston throws to Amari Thomas. Now, Amari Thomas had to break a tackle to get to this spot, but he's running up the sideline, right? Amari Thomas scoring touchdowns, what he does. But Mekhi Muse flies across the field from his middle field routes and throws what the equivalent of like a basketball moving screen would be on the defenders. And without breaking any rules, pulling any crackback blocks or anything dirty, Mekhi Muse launches Amari Thomas down the field untouched for a gigantic touchdown for Houston to kind of set up so much of the rest of the game after that point, right? It felt like Houston could score kind of however they wanted. That's a touchdown launched by Mekhi Muse. He also had a big crack in a legal way into the middle of the field to kind of spring a ding. Connors catch and run later in the game. Really strong performance. Again, in his role from Mekhi Muse, and a guy that, frankly, with Boogie Johnson being down, something that you might see more of over the course of the season. We'll see a guy that I think you are going to see more of based on his snap count on Saturday is Harvey Broussard. He got a second watch all-star for me because, look, he only had 2 targets, and I think he probably deserved more than 2 targets. He only had 2 targets. His catch on the sideline, so it's 3rd and 8, that same long third quarter drive where you feel like you're putting the game away if you can punch one in the end zone and do that back-to-back touchdown kind of thing you do with halftime, right? He's on the sideline, tiptoes it, pulls it in for an 11-yard catch on 3rd and 8 that, again, propels a drive. That drive that he made plays on, that Jason Queso Brooks made plays on, that Mekhi Muse made a block on, those plays add up to a drive where Houston went for a 6.5-minute touchdown in the second quarter, and then a quick less than 2-minute touchdown at the end of the second quarter, and then open up with a 9-minute and change touchdown in the third quarter. Those 3 drives put together using these kinds of performances that don't get the notoriety of the Kenneth Koziel touchdown or the Wake kind of Wigman kind of scrambling around and found Amari Thomas in the back of the end zone. On like, yes, those are the touchdown plays, and we've celebrated those a lot. These second watch guys, though, when you're paying attention, okay, a touchdown is coming at the end of this drive. How does it get there? That's where so many of these guys show up. And frankly, it's a testament to the kinds of things Willie Fritz and the culture are building in Houston where the guys are making these plays knowing that they don't get their names in the paper for them, right? It's a big, big deal for the program to have these kind of guys so consistently, especially when you've got Stephon Boogie Johnson out, David Ndukwe out, Rashawn Sanford out. Those are 3 starters that were really, really good for Houston that went out at various times this season. Boogie did announce on Sunday night via social media he's done for the season. Those three guys being replaced by guys that have been filling these kinds of roles already. Well, obviously, those three guys are very talented. These new guys filling those roles, right, clearly have bought it in a way that makes you feel comfortable with them out there. Now, as we get more on Boogie Johnson's injury, I'm sure we'll hear more on Monday, the presser. We may break it down on Tuesday's episode. We'll see. But I want to talk about something that comes out before Tuesday, and that is the AP poll, the ratings, rankings, etc., that came out on Sunday, and how Houston still somehow left out of these. Before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by your buddies over at FanDuel because the football season is here. FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, it would hit to get $300 back and bonus bets to use across the app. That's in-game, pre-game, uh, prop bets, money lines, whatever. Houston is an 8.5-point dog this weekend. We'll talk all week about why Houston has a chance in this one. So I say go to FanDuel, make it interesting. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's show is also brought to you by Quo, formerly known as OpenPhone. One of the tools that make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system that you've heard us talk about before, just a new name. And here's why it matters. Every time you miss a call, money is left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the number one business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app to your phone or computer, so no more carrying two phones or relying on a landline. Now, we've all been the customer side of this. We're going through the internet's gigantic Rolodex of phone numbers, and you're just trying to get someone to answer and talk to you about your issues or whatever you're trying to find or help solve your problem. Quo helps make sure that you don't miss those phone calls because they're looking for someone that answers the phone. Quo makes sure that you do just that. See, over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. It's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. If you got existing numbers in our service, Quo will help port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. I'm gonna start this segment on a high note. Bowl eligibility for the Houston Cougars is a big deal. Houston is 6-1 following their victory over Arizona over the weekend, and they beat a good football team on Saturday. It's a big deal. Uh, and that means at 6-1, 6 games, you're eligible for a bowl. And Big 12 schools are eligible for some fun bowls. Obviously, the college football playoff potential is down there. And technically, Houston is not mathematically eliminated from anything. At 6-1, they could finish the season on a winning streak. And actually, at 11-1, they probably control their own destiny into that conference championship game. 10-2 gets dicey. We'll see, right? The Valero Alamo Bowl is San Antonio is also an option. So if you don't get the CFP kind of stuff, Valero Alamo Bowl is kind of one of the top end bowls. It's where when BYU got snubbed last year, that's where they ended up. And they actually played a former Pac-12, current Big 12 school in Colorado. That's a possibility in that one. You could be a Big 12 school representative in the Valero Alamo Bowl and play one of those four former Pac-12 schools. The last year, I believe that's happening. But you could play a former Pac-12 school that is currently a Big 12 school, or a former Pac-12 school that's currently a Big 10 school as well. I don't think Washington State or Oregon State are going to be eligible. Don't quote me on that, but I don't think Washington State is. I know Oregon State's not. But you could see yourself playing one of them in that Valero Alamo Bowl. My personal favorite, because of the fun hijinks around it, is the Pop-Tarts Bowl in Orlando. Get to eat a bunch of Pop-Tarts. You and I would probably talk about Pop-Tarts every day of the week that week. Spoiler alert, it's fun. That's a potential Big 12 bowl game down the road in Orlando. Obviously, the Kinder Texas Bowl is at NRG Stadium. Also, Liberty Bowl, Memphis. The Rate Bowls in Phoenix, and then the Big 12 schools play in the Shreveport's Independence Bowl, right? So obviously some really, really fun options down the line for you and I as fans. But as a program, being bowl eligible means that when the season ends at the end of November, you've got another month of football. You get to work, develop culture, build ties, build bonds, etc. And while you may think that there's only silly Pop Tarts in that Pop Tarts bowl, and frankly, I almost would argue while the result is fun to brag about, the bigger part of the game is not the game as a result, but that month of work you get to put in building and constructing and helping elevate your program, right? I think it's a big, big deal here. I want to shout out to Andy Pate, he used to work for the University of Houston. I should athletic department. He's an alumni, etc. Great Twitter follow if you're not already. He points out that Willie Fritz is one of just 4 coaches in America in year 1 or 2 of their current program that is already bowl eligible. And further, of those 4, Willie Fritz is one of 2, the other being Kurt Signetti at Indiana, that are taking over programs that were uh, had a losing record the year before they got there that is already bowl eligible, right? Willie Fritz is a tremendous person and culture builder and program builder, obviously, but that is national recognition that the guy deserves. And getting into the bowls this early in the season means that you won some games you were supposed to win, and frankly won some games that were more like toss-ups. I think America thought Houston, Colorado was a toss-up. We had talked about how it probably wasn't, but America certainly thought so. You won this game of the weekend. That certainly was a toss-up. You were a home dog in the game of the weekend and won that one. I think all that to say that Houston, you can you can't argue that has had a successful season thus far. Yes, you played one really good team, lost your quarterback in the second quarter, the wheels fell off a little bit. You've rebounded since then and continue to make strides each week. And to kind of put a damper on all that, the AP poll came out on Sunday, and Houston received 34 votes. 34 votes was not enough to make it into that top 25. And it's been a couple years since Houston was in the top 25. And so, I don't mean to say like we're expecting it or whatever, but it did feel like at 6-1, couple conference wins, things were shaping up where you had a shot. And clearly, 34 people thought you did, right? But I think a bigger issue here is as Houston is a Big 12 school now in the Power Four, looking at that top 25, the Big 12 as a conference is kind of getting slighted. Like, look, we don't want to give them too much credit, but Texas Tech just lost the backup quarterback after losing a key defensive lineman for the year on the road, and they dropped 7 spots from 7 to 14. Utah, who we also don't want to give too much credit to, they have 2 losses to teams that were in the top 15 and top 10, respectively, at the time, and they're completely out of the top 25. Oklahoma can lose to Texas, which is Texas is, got at that point only Power 4 win. I guess they beat Kentucky over the weekend with barely. And Oklahoma still sits at 13 as an SEC school. Alabama can lose to an currently unranked Florida State team, and they're in the top 4 in America with an unranked team on their losing side of their resume, right? Oregon, big win, is a double overtime win over Penn State. Penn State's season's gone about fire their coach level bad with a gigantic all the millions of dollars buyout bad, right? Illinois' resume is essentially the same as Utah's and maybe worse even, but they're at 23. Michigan sits at barely making the top 25 at number 25 and has a loss to an unranked team. And I understand that we all know the Big 12 bias, the anti-Big 12 biases there in these rankings. And Houston is succumbing to that by not making the back end of the top 25, which is not quite as big a deal as making the top end of the top 10 or whatever. I get all that. I get that. Rebuilding program. I get that. The issue here, ranked wins, playing ranked opponents well, those impact your strength of schedule. If the rankings are slanted, so will the strength of schedule rankings, right? You can't beat a bunch of top 25 teams if 90% of those spots are reserved for 2 conferences, regardless of their actual resume. It doesn't work like that. This will always come down to the sport has always come before the BCS. Writers just kind of said they thought this team was good. That was the national champion, right? That's how things worked. BCS made it computers, but those computers seemed also flawed. So much this playoff system, all of this comes down to people picking. And when you leave that sort of bias in these kinds of pickings and don't have Big 12 representation in the picking of teams and all of that, then ultimately you're going to fall to this kind of strength of schedule. And it comes down to things like the college game day scene too, right? Like college game day has been at like 6 SEC schools in a row, right? I can remember they obviously they came and played Houston when Houston was a Group of 5 school. They also went to like Grambling and they went to like Air Force, and they've been all over the country to find the best college football games. I'm not saying that they have to go to every single FCS school. 1 versus 2 in the FCS this weekend should have been a college game to game. It ain't, right? That would have been the environment that is the show of old. And the media has shifted towards basically watching these 2 conferences. And while it's going to take a couple of years of winning against them to ultimately shift that, I get that. It's unfortunate to see it play out in this way. And again, Houston making the top 25 at the back end of the 25 would not be earth shattering, but it'd be a big deal. We'd be talking about it. Anyway, that's my diatribe. Is I feel like some folks are still out there watching that part and maybe not fully aware of what they're watching. I want to talk about one guy I wish we all could have watched play football. Frankly, I kind of wish we all could have watched him play high school football, and that's Warren McVea. Before we get to all that, I do want to talk to you about our buddies over at Monarch, because let's be honest, most of us can't even name every single one of our bank accounts or financial accounts that we have going on, whatever, let alone what they'd actually be worth. Between 401ks, savings, investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table when you're losing track. That's why my family, also using Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that helps bring your entire financial life together in one clean and easy to use, I combined word there, interface on your laptop or phone. Look, I teach, I coach, I podcast. My wife teaches. We've got multiple sources of income all coming in one spot. Monarch Money lays it all out in one place. Shows you where the money's coming in from, where the money's going out to. You can make sure you're keeping track of things in the best, most efficient way possible. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. And I don't mean to end on a Debbie Downer, but I do want to express a rest in peace kind of moment for Warren McVea. Now, I don't know. I know I've got some younger listeners. I don't know how old the older upper echelon of my listeners are. I can confidently tell you that as a history teacher, the sport we enjoy watching, that is college football, would not be the same if it weren't for Warren McVea and had he not chosen to go to the University of Houston. I don't know what the differences would be. I don't want to hypothesize on that or go down a rabbit hole on that. But had he not chosen to be a Houston Cougar, it would have all been different. Now, the Houston Chronicle reports that there had been a long illness, but McVea passed away at 79 years old in his home in Los Angeles on Sunday. Now, he's a Houston Cougar legend, but he's really a San Antonio area legend, legitimately as viral could be in the 1960s. When you talk about his high school career, he was consensus top player in the state of Texas, if not top in the country. He averaged over 10 yards a carry in the top level of Texas high school football. He chose Houston of 74 scholarship offers, and he ultimately chose Houston, becoming the first Black player to commit to a scholarship to a major, previously all-white college in Texas. That's a obviously monumental deal. And for what it's worth, Sports Illustrated claimed that McVea's success at Houston, quote, could determine the speed at which the Southwest Conference teams integrate, which ultimately would be faster, mostly, than the Southeast Conference teams would integrate. This is a big deal for football in the South. That's a gigantic burden to place on a 17-year-old. And I said 17 because he graduated high school and enrolled at Houston at 17. His response was becoming a two-time All-American and on the receiving end of the longest play in school history at University of Houston. He had a 99-yard touchdown reception against Washington State. Fun fact, that's the first game in college ever played on artificial turf. He was the first Black player to play on an SEC campus when Houston visited Tennessee. Tennessee had actually been integrated in 1964, but had not had a Black player on the field or in their stadium until McVea showed up as a visitor. Spoiler, that was in fall of 65. By February of 66, they're offering scholarships to Black players across the South. Right? That Tennessee saw what's going on. Right? Now, stories do indicate that when Bill Yeoman took over the program in 1962, he kind of began to search for opportunities to integrate the team that fall in 63. And McVea, I think by and large, when he showed up in the spring of '65, was the perfect person for this. Yeoman had worked with Ted Nance and other leaders in different communities across the state of Texas to kind of build and find where would this be the best spot to start this chapter of Houston athletics, of athletics and of college athletics, of athletics in the South, right? And it's no accident that Warren McVea, Elvin Hayes, Don Chaney all had their first games for Houston in 1965, right? Elvin may have had the best pro career and the biggest Hall of Fame impact at an NBA level, of a professional level, of any of these three guys. But the impact McVea had in football is just as, if not more impactful. You look at the ripple effect across major college football in the South, right? Again, a guy that went over 10 yards of carry in high school, and people are debating if he's going to go to school in the state of Texas. Can you imagine what kinds of obstacles have to be up for that to even be a thought? Uh, that's just, and that's just like trying to get him to a university like Houston. And then you think about, I'm not going to quote the things because I probably can't quote the things. This is a family friendly program, but the kinds of things he was hearing from fans and student sections as they travel around, and he just took it all in stride. And I don't mean to say it wasn't hard or challenging, but just took it all to the football field and just played and played better and worked harder and opened unseen, unfathomable amount of doors for people with the way he did for the University of Houston. I want to go back though to that one tidbit. McVea chose Houston out of 74 scholarship offers. 74. He could have legitimately played anywhere he wanted. He could have made the exact same mark at a number of other Southern institutions had he wanted to. He could have taken a different path and gone to a school that had been integrated for some time on the West Coast or somewhere else, right? Could have done a number of different things. And he chose to be a Houston Cougar. And I think that's important. I think that's significant. Obviously, as the host of Locked on Cougs, I'm probably supposed to say it's important and significant and all of that, right? But Houston is a big, booming, and it wasn't the same size in the 60s necessarily, but certainly wasn't a little town, right? And there's a whole, different wards and this and the city and the way that things get divided up by highways and all that. I get that. He came to University of Houston, put Houston across his chest, and went across the South, and toted the football, did the dirty work he had to do, lit up scoreboards, electrified student sections, and just carried himself with class the whole time. And like, yes, life goes differently after you leave Houston and all that. He had a pro career for a while. I get all that. But the sport we love and the sport you and I get to talk about all the time, or we talk about basketball a decent amount as well, obviously, but is forever changed because of his impact. And like when you talk about, the I forget the UT guy. UT has the last all white champion in 1969, but they actually had a black player on the team that wasn't eligible to play or something. There's some caveat they always put on that, sure, right? That comes after McVay's in the pros, right? Like Houston's been through this and had success with this by the time all that happens. And it's no accident that happens at Houston that honestly, that you have Andre Ware winning his Heisman at Houston, that Houston basketball goes international and pulls in Hakeem Olajuwon. Like all these different doors opening for people at Houston seems to be a consistent, common theme in athletics. And McVea is one of the first instances of that, and it's one of the most nationally recognized ones. And I understand we put 11 down where we put 11 down on the football field because Ware went to the Heisman in a way that needs to be recognized every chance possible. It makes you wonder, do you put a 42 down, right? Do you put some other number down as well? I don't know. I enjoy talking about again, I do teach history by day. I enjoy talking about the historical side of this thing and the impact of the efforts of people that are willing to stand up and do difficult things because it can make a change is really, really, really important. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Coogs Day as I wax poetically like it's a history class here at the end. Today's show is brought to you by our brothers over at FanDuel, so make sure to go check them out. Thank you again for making us your first listen. But if you want a second listen of the day, go check out Locked On Big 12, what Drake Toll's got going on over there. And for he had a fun weekend, looked like in Provo, gonna be honest. I didn't think I'd be saying that all in one sentence, but apparently they had a fun weekend in Provo. Locked On Coogs, Locked On podcast, now with your team every day. Go Coogs.